All right. Well, I think I'm plugged in. Hello, everybody out there in On One land. This is Doug Landreth at Photomorphos, and I'm very happy to be here today to talk to you about really how I love this package. And I call it a package because there's so many elements to it. But my work is all a lot of very composited, sort of complex images that I put together to represent something more emotionally based as opposed to what's in front of my camera at any one point in time. And I want to discuss with you and demonstrate to you why Perfect Photo Suite 8 works so well as a visual tool in my workflow. And I hope to demonstrate some techniques that I use in Perfect Layers to help me create both simple and advanced composites that are driven by this very visual workflow. And I also want to show you how easy it is to make quick adjustments to your images and how the live previews of all these multiple visual effects can quickly focus your efforts and possibly lead to new directions and inspiration for sort of the process of developing your image. So actually just a little bit about me. I'm going to show you just a couple of pieces of my work just to show you what I mean. There's a lot of compositing. I use a lot of textural-based images to blend in. I like my stories to tell, or my images to tell stories actually, and it's a great interface for me to be able to do these sorts of images, and you can see just a sampling of some of my portfolio here. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to create a couple of different images for you today, and I'm going to start with a fairly simple landscape image. So this image is sort of up by the Duval area of Seattle, and when I saw it, it just had this. I love the period in the late fall when all the leaves are gone. It's kind of a winter sky. There's a mood and an atmosphere that's kind of fun, and so I'm going to work on this just a little bit in hopes of really enhancing the feeling that I got while I was standing there taking this picture. So I open it by just going and navigating with it selected into the layers module. And this is really where all your layered workflow happens. And a couple of tabs over on the left-hand side allow you to navigate through your files if you're looking for additional files, or your extras. And I've talked in a couple of different webinars that are on this site about how you can load in your users' extras and work with them to show different backgrounds, borders, and textures. My work is very textural based, and so I have quite a bit of textures that I've loaded in and from the Photomorphos website. So really, and it leads me to really one of the first things that I love about this software and this workflow, because I can come in and look at a body of textures with the thumbnails just right to the side of my image. It makes selecting textures or any other composited image very, very easy to get a feel for how it's going to work. First off, I'm going to close this up for a second. I don't think I'm quite ready to add some textures. What I really want to do is show you a couple of other features that are great. If I haven't done any work prior to bringing it in, I can actually take this into the next module, Perfect Enhance, and just fine-tune this image just a little bit. I want to pull in a little bit more detail in these highlights and maybe crisp it up, just to do a little pre-sharpening on this. So I can actually take the highlights, maybe reduce the highlights down so that I get some tone up here in the highlights. You're beginning to see some of the clouds. Maybe take the brightness down just a touch. And if I take the brightness down, I might want to just open the shadows just a little bit as well. So I can do these kinds of things really quickly. There's also this quick panel where you can do some real quick adjustments as well. The other thing is that I can come in here and apply a little bit of sharpening, and just like for the screen, or you know, and maybe just take that back just a little bit, just a hint of sharpening here. I'm going to actually take that back a little bit more. Okay. So when I'm done, I just hit apply. All right. Well, Murphy has joined us today. I'm not exactly sure why. This is, oh, all right. So it's applying the effects to the image. So this is great. So it takes me right back into perfect layers. So you can see it didn't, it's really non-destructive because it's actually put those changes up onto a second layer, and it's titled it Enhance. So I know exactly, you know, what I've done with this. And I use this a lot. I'll actually use these layer names in many cases to talk about, to add notes about what I've done to the image. SoVe got this now where I'm ready to do some other fine tuning, and one of the things that I wanted to show you is this. It's a wonderful tool up here. It's called the Magic Eraser, and it's really a content aware eraser. So if you've got some things in the scene that are distracting, you can come in here using the bracket keys. I can very quickly cover up like this limb that was sort of distracting for me, and release and get rid of it. And you know, it really does sort of a magical job of taking care of a lot of the things. So it's like, I don't want, you know, houses up here on the hillside, so I'm just going to come in here, get rid of some of these houses up here and up here and up in here. Any little thing that is drawing my eye away from really where I want the image to be. Okay, so give me just a minute and I'm going to take you through this little process. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this and maybe back in here. All right, so it's looking a little cleaner. I'm liking it a little bit better. Then after I've got it to a point where I want to start bringing in other images like textures, then I can come in here and add it. And like I talked to you before, it's really great to see previews of all the textures that I've got in here. I've got some that I think I know that I want to use, and let's just scroll up here. I think it's the let me see, it's up here. Artistic selections textures. There's two ways to look at this panel. One along the side here as thumbnails, but if you notice when I hold the mouse over this category heading, there's a little icon that pops up with a grid. If I click on that grid, I get very large previews of all the images in this category. That can be very helpful as well. So I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to look for something that I think sort of works with the tonality, and you know, it gives me sort of the same sense of the scene that I had in my mind. And this thing, you know, this image here kind of picks up some of the tones. It seems to be working pretty well. I can add that onto my layer stack just by dragging and dropping it over, and I say add as layer, and it's going to say okay. Now I'm going to make some new real estate here by closing that side panel, and I can always open it up by dragging this handle back open. So now I've got this texture over the top. Well, I can't see the scene, right? And the first thing that I always like to do is scale the texture the way that it works for the image. And so you can just grab the handles and drag them so that you can scale it. You can also click on this fill, and that fits it actually to the window, so there's no overlap and so forth. So that's sort of a brilliant thing. There's another thing that's really handy that I use a lot, and that's these little icons up here where you can rotate 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise, or you can flip vertically or horizontally. And a lot of times I'll do that to position the textures where I want. This is a little too spotty for the sky. I'd rather have something like this or this up in the sky portion. So I'm just going to flip this and maybe flip it again. This is working a little bit better for me. Okay. So the next thing is like, well, how do I make this texture work with this image? Well, I always start with the blending modes. Point number 2. The first point is like great to be able to work with selecting a texture by having the side-by-side with the image. Well, once you have the texture on here, blending modes become your most important tool. And if I click on the blending modes here, it gives me this drop-down menu. I don't have to really understand blend modes. All I have to do is scroll my mouse down and see the effect of each blend mode on my image. This is really the principle of workflow in this program. It is so visual, you really don't have to understand a lot of the complexities of what's going on behind the scenes. You just need to be able to identify when something is happening that you like. Okay, so I like multiply. I'm going to set this to multiply and see what happens. So it's like this is beginning to work, but I'd like to minimize a little bit of this texture and make it a little bit softer, I guess. And one way that I love to do that is I just make a duplicate layer of it. So here's this duplicate layer icon on the bottom of your layers stack. It's asking me because I had transformed that layer. So I apply the transformation. This layer is a duplicate and it's set to multiply mode. So everything darkens. But the texture is sort of darkening itself. I really want it to, this layer to be different. I want it to overlap the other layers so the textures sort of become refined and different. So I come back up here really quickly, just hit that, those rotate buttons, and you can see that it's like helping immediately to really put a new, whole new kind of feeling into this texture. All right, so that's looking pretty good to me in terms of the texture. Now I do want to add a little different texture to this as well. I think I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to select these two textures. Yeah, go ahead and apply the. I'm going to select those two textures, and this is the merge, and I'm just going to merge those two texture layers, and then set that back to multiply, and I'm good to go. Now I'm going to add one additional texture, and that's another way that I can just create a new and richer look with this. So I'm going to go down looking for texture that might have a little bit more color tone to it, maybe a little finer textural quality to it, and I like this one here. It's also picking up some of the tonality of this image. So I, again, just drag it over the top of the layer stack and confirm that yes, I want to add it as a layer. And then let's go back in and let's go ahead and zoom out. I can see my handles. I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees, and then let's just fill. All right, so crank this up here and this down here and apply that transformation. Okay, so again, I want this to affect the texture. I'm going to turn off the underlying layer, so all I'm seeing is its effect on the texture underneath. Then I can kind of scroll down and see what this texture is doing to the texture underneath. Okay, I'm going to come up here with something like hard light. I like some of the intensity of that. I've set this to hard light, and I'm just going to play with these flip modes until I get something that's kind of interesting, and I kind of liken this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn back on my underlying layer of the scene, and I'm getting something kind of nice and rich. And you can always go in, apply it, go ahead and apply. You can always go in and you know, I've set this to hard light, I've set this to set that to hard light, and I've set this to multiply, and I'm going to come in and, you know, then you can start playing with the opacities just to really dial in visually what you want to happen. Okay, so this is looking pretty good, and I think it's all going to be great. I'm going to take these two textures, and let's see if I select those and merge them, and then set that to multiply. And that's looking okay. That's about what I want for the textures, okay? So you can, you know, I talked to you about how visually you can watch and see what the effect the textures are having underneath by doing the transforming and applying the multiple multiply modes or the you know, different blend modes until you get exactly what you want. But, you know, here's one thing that I love about this program. It's like, okay, so now this image is beginning to look a little dark. Let me get you some additional screen real estate so you guys can see this a little bit bigger. Okay, so, oops, didn't want to transform. Hang on one second. Let me get back. Yeah, cancel that. Let me go back here. Sorry. Hang on one second. Oh, yeah, there we go. All right. So let's get this fit in here, and I always like to reduce it just a hair. So we've got these textures, and I've just, you know, undone up to a certain point. I'm going to leave that for now. Oops. Pardon me, my mouse is a little too sensitive here. 1 minute. Okay, here we go. Okay, but I'm glad that actually happened because it points to another thing. Don't be afraid also to experiment with your layer stack. You can easily change the look of things quite a bit by just moving the layer stack images around, changing the blend modes, and changing the opacities until you're happy. Here comes one of the tricks that I really love, and it's taking an image. Let me unselect here. Taking an image like this base image that's got these layers stacked on top of it in various blend modes, and working with it in another part of the program, like Perfect Effects. And what, you know, the delightful part of this is that you can see the effect of your preset or filters on the layer that's being affected through the other layers that are applied with different blend modes. The changes that I make to this image are going to show up under those. The texture images aren't going to change at all, except on how they relate to the tones of this image. So I can take this, just zip down just a little bit, and I can apply a lot of different you know, presets or filters. And let's talk about presets first. We have some presets on the Photomorphos website that I've developed, and I was playing with this earlier, and I really liked this preset that I call Dramatic Fog. So I'm going to apply this preset, and a preset is essentially a stack of filters in a filter stack, a predetermined filter stack with all these different settings. So I can come in here, and I can create just exactly the mood and so forth that I want on the layer underneath. And we can turn on and off the preview so you can see, so there's the before and here's the after, and it's sort of already picked up some nice characteristics. I'm going to close this preset panel just for a second, and let's go a little bit large. And I'm going to take, the other thing is that once you have a preset applied, then you can go in here and turn on and off different aspects of that preset until you get what you want. And the whole thing is a live preview for you of what's going on and what's happening on the image. So you can come in here and really tweak it until you get it exactly the way you want. So let's So I'm just going to call this good for now for the sake of illustration, and let's go ahead and apply this. But you can see in the presets each filter has its own filter options. So you really can dial it in to the nth degree, or actually I'm not going to apply it right yet because I'm going to show you a couple of other things. We talk about the benefits of this visual process, and really the visual process comes down to just clicking on a preview that might look interesting and seeing the effect that it has on your image in total. So I mean, it's like magic, quite honestly. And these categories of presets also have this same icon that pops up if you go up to the heading in the presets. If you click on that icon, it's going to show me this image with all these different presets applied to it. Now what it's doing is it's showing me the preset effect on that layer only. So if I use this view, I'm not getting a preview of what the additional layer stack is doing back in layers, but I do get a sense of what is going to be happening to my image. So, you know, I can select something from there and have it applied like low tide, and then, you know, some of these presets have got some like gradients and stuff, and I'm kind of liking this. So that's my whole point, is that a very sophisticated image processing controls are being applied with just a click of a button, and my decision making is all based on what this is looking like. So it makes it very easy. Okay, so I'm going to click apply, and we're going to take this back into Perfect Layers, the layer stack. And again, what's happened is that it's created a new image with perfect effects. So if I don't like that, I can turn on the other layer and go back to the one I had and redo it. Or I can change this. I can change this blending mode to something like soft light, or go ahead and go back to normal, or reduce the opacity, or change it to something like color mode. So you can see that I tell a lot of people this, you know, this is where experimentation becomes very, very easy with this visual workflow. You can change all the characteristics of everything in here and watch as it's doing, and really end up with something in a direction that you'll love. So let's yeah, here's another thing. You can also duplicate images. So I'm going to take this layer that I just created, I'm going to duplicate it. Then you can change that blend mode to something like, you know, if it's looking a little too dark, let's maybe set it to screen and reduce the opacity, and you essentially get something that is you know, adjusting the highlights, you know, brightening the highlights, and it leaves the shadows sort of alone because it's in proportion. All the tones are in proportion to the image. So you can do, you know, some like, you know, overall sort of dodging and burning easily with something like this. You can set it to screen. You can set it, you want it a little richer or deeper, set it to multiply, and you can see that you're getting some interesting stuff going on here. So once you get that done, you know, if I'm sort of happy with where it's at overall, but I might want the overall image to change, you can do something like this. You can go up here to Layer, and you can say New Stamped Layer. And what that's going to do is going to consolidate all that information onto the top of the layer stack. Now it's a single image. I can turn on and off all these, and it's not going to affect this top layer set to normal and 100% layer opacity. But I preserved my editing possibilities by keeping all these layers. Then I can do stuff like take that back into Perfect Effects. And we talked about how we applied some presets. I'd love to show you now what you can do with filters. So presets are sort of pre-configured filter stacks that you can modify to your every whim. But they also have pre-configured filters and the ability to select a filter and make your own adjustments right here. So there's really two ways. If you want to see what that filter is doing, you can always take a look and see some of the filter options here that are essentially different filter settings for that particular filter. And you can kind of see what's going on with the image. And now that I'm working on a consolidated image that's all one thing, I can come in here and say, all right, well, I think I'd like a glow, but I'm not quite sure how much. Let's come up here, click on this icon. It's like, oh, all right, now we're talking. It's like, what do I want the image to look like? Because it gives me previews of the image with that filter throughout, you know, so then you get to choose. Like I said, it's just, you know, on the base level, it's just beautiful for exploring a lot of different looks without understanding a lot of sort of the technicalities behind it. So I'm kind of liking that. And then I'm going to maybe apply another filter to it. I'd like a little bit of a vignette to this. So this is where I can add another filter right here. I can come down and select vignette from this filter menu. Okay, and that's not too bad. That's subtle. That's like the big softy. I kind of like the big softy a little bit, but it's a little bit much. So each of these filters has the option of being able to be, you know, adjust the level of the layer opacity of that filter, so you can really fine tune it like that. Okay. So by the time we get done, let's just take that and apply it. So that's, you know, that's the whole ball of wax here, is just the ability to think in terms of changing, like this layer that's showing underneath textures in Perfect Effects or Perfect Enhance, or taking it into the masking program, which I'll show next. So that sort of gives you a sensibility on really just a simple composite using a couple of different textures, applying textures in multiple ways, and all done really visually in a point-and-click manner. And that's, you know, and then you can save the image and revisit it at a later time because it's all saved in a layer stack. Okay, so you know, you gotta love it. And let's go ahead and close this image, and I'm going to show you one other image. We go back into the browse module here. That's more of a composite kind of image. So I'm going to take this guy and open him up. And I'm going to say okay. So essentially, because of this, you know, I've got sort of a limited time, I didn't want to go through the whole process of using Perfect Mask to create the outline of this guy. Let me get this transform and I'll show you this guy. So I came across this guy at Venice Beach down in California, and then I also came across this scene, which I really liked. I liked sort of the pale tones of those greens, and I liked the character of this guy, and I love the fact that he's got that bright red pop, and the rest of him sort of blends into the tonality of the scene, and I love the old bike and so forth. So I wanted to create kind of a neat composite image. So I took this layer of the individual and placed it over the top on the layer over the background, took it into Perfect Mask and created this mask for him. And when you're creating the mask, if you have the actual scene in behind, you can see how the mask is working, and it's working pretty well. And so I'm going to apply this. I really want to make this a little bit more of a panorama, and so I can come in here and actually just change the canvas size, and I'm going to change the width, let's say, to unlock the proportions and change the width to 4,000 pixels. Yeah, and then I can do something like this. I can take this underneath layer and I'm going to just bring it over here. I'm going to place it in here. Then I'm going to say apply. And then I'm going to make a duplicate of this layer. And I'm going to take that, let me zoom out here, and I'm going to move it So I've got the surfer in the background, and the horizon is about the same. Let's go about there, maybe. I like that. So I've sort of extended the background to fill this image. I'm going to say apply to that. Actually, I'm going to just drag this up just to get rid of that little gap and apply once more. Then I'm going to take and apply a mask to this because I want this showing behind his left shoulder, but I don't want this showing behind his right shoulder. So I'm going to take, this is the masking bug right here, and I'm going to take a shape and I'm going to go linear left. So it's going to automatically populate this with this masking bug, and it's masking everything to the left of this. So I'm getting that clean background look, and it's blending up here because that's all pretty much one color. So that's working beautifully. I'm going to say OK to that, and let's go here. So that's good. I think the composition is beginning to work for me. Let's take a look at this guy. If I want to make any adjustments to him, I can. Let's go ahead and maybe rotate him a little bit. Let's make him a little bit larger in here. Yeah. Yeah, okay, something like that's good. Let's just say apply. Then I can come in here and just go ahead and run the crop tool through this to get it where we want and apply that. Awesome. So I've got the basics of my composite working pretty well. So what I can do is go ahead and jump it to a new layer. Let me just do one thing. I don't really like his knees in there. I'm going to, even on a time-limited webinar, I've got to make things absolutely just right. So hang on. Yeah. All right. So say apply. Good. So now what I can do is I can come up here and let's just make this one image. So I'm going to go up here again and say new stamped layer. And without losing the editing and the original images, now I've got something that I can work with here. And then I can come back in. Let's go back into the user's extras, and I want to add another texture. Actually, the texture I've included with the file, so I'm going to go ahead and open the file in this like browse window and go to Venice Beach, and I'm going to use this image of a filter and add it as a texture and add it as a layer. Okay. Now again, I'm going to rotate it and hit fill. Okay, so it's filled the dimension at the top. Oops, let me undo that. Let me go back, grab it again, sorry. All right. Add as layer. All right, so let's rotate it again and bring it up on top here so we can see it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and scale it out so that it's covering the image. Okay, and say apply. And again, you know, when I'm looking for these textures and looking through, I am looking visually in my library using either the manage, you know, the extras window or the browse window. Come up with this. Next thing is, of course, the different blending modes. Again, you can see what all the different blend modes are doing to this. So you can, I mean, there's some pretty fun stuff that can happen here. The most common ones are multiply and overlay and soft light. Typically, I'm really liking what multiply is doing here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, so we can see what's going on. So multiply is not too bad. I can also, and one of my favorite tricks is to go ahead and duplicate that texture again like I did in the previous one and then add another one. A lot of the times I will use multiply first, and then on top of that I'll reintroduce some contrast with either soft light or multiply. Then you can come in and start playing with opacities. Mix the opacities with the two to see the difference. So you can see what difference that's made. Quite a bit of difference. You might say, well, that's got some, that's got some characteristics that are nice, but it's a little too saturated maybe, and there might be a little too much texture showing through over the top of them. These textures are getting laid in over the top, and if that texture is objectionable in something, we might want to get rid of it just a little bit. So, well, what can I do? Well, let's go ahead and take this texture that's set to soft light mode into Perfect Effects. Okay, and then let's zoom out again, just so that we can see the difference. And I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to apply a couple of different filters. The first one is the color enhancer. And that's going to allow me the opportunity to change the color of this, or just maybe subdue the saturation of it a little bit. We can see the effect that it's having on the image. So that's looking pretty good. I like that better. It's not quite so saturated. So that's good. The other thing that I want to do, though, is come in here and reduce the effect of the texture on the skin. Now, if I just mask the texture is set to soft light. If I mask the texture out completely, the color and the tonality of his skin is going to change. I don't want that. All I want is some of that hard, crispy detail to be reduced in there. Well, they have a filter here called lens blur. So let's take and run this lens blur filter. The lens blur filter is really cool. It usually pops open with like a preset mask for your lens blur. And what I want to do is I want to create a radial mask for it. You can click on radial here, and you can see the mask. And what I want is I don't want to. I want the to be blocked from his skin, so I'm going to take these mask arrows and like reduce them down, and maybe this gradient tool. So this is the circles allow you to change the area of the mask, and then the dotted line is the feather. Well, so I'm just going to put it up here, make it gradate a little bit, and then you can see the effect of this. So right now it's going to mask everything. I need to invert this mask because it's blurring everything outside this and keeping this sharp. So I want to invert the mask so that and you can see what difference that made. I don't know if you can see on your monitors or not, but it really took out all that sort of harsh grain effect from that from the texture. But you can see the color didn't change and the tonality, the skin tonality didn't change. So you can really fine tune that. So in a couple of quick filters underneath these, with it affecting the layers underneath in the filter stack, I've changed it to accommodate something that was objectionable to me. So let's go ahead and say apply to that. So with that done, let's go ahead and fit it in the context. So it's looking pretty good, but there's a couple of other things that we can do. And I think what we could do is, in this instance, come in here and go ahead and stamp it again. And then from there, I can take that whole image into Perfect Effects. And with it in Perfect Effects, then again, you start the fun process of playing. Let's go to presets. I've got some presets that I call Windows to the West on the Photomorphos website that are kind of fun. And then it's like, well, where do I want this image to live? There's a lot of different looks that I can come in here and tailor. And I think what I chose was where's the sharp spurs? Yeah, there's sharp spurs. So click on this preset. You can see the tonal contrast is really pumped up. There's some sharpening going on, and some additional texture going on and everything, and I can come up here and use this master opacity to reduce the effect of the preset on the image until I'm pretty sure that I get what I like. And then if I really want to do some other changes on top of this preset, I can do that by clicking the Add button and coming into a different filter, maybe possibly, let's go back into Color Enhancer and just desaturate that just a little bit. So again, we'll just take the saturation of that filter down a little bit. Right, now that's starting to look pretty fun. So you can see, look at all these visual choices that you've got. And really, knowing next to nothing, I mean, if you just have a handle on where these things are, you've got permission to go and play. And you get something really fun. So let's just take a look at what we've got. I mean, in a matter of, what, 15 minutes, put this together fairly easily. I mean, I'm discounting the time that I took to actually outline him before. And then you can continue to refine and refine. I've got all the layers that are ready to rock and roll. So those are really the highlights in terms of how I use this suite to guide me in the creation of a lot of images. You know, the compositing with perfect mask right there, the layer, you know, using some of the layering techniques by creating the composites and stamping the layers and using blending modes and mixing up the layer orientations, actually taking one of the images into Perfect Effects that is underneath the effects of blend modes of 2 or 3 layers on top. Those kinds of things, you know, a lot of people don't understand that they can do, and it makes it just a you know, fantastic workflow for everybody. So really the lessons are, you know, number one, this program really gives you permission to experiment and play and sort of dial into that sort of inner sense of what the image means to you. You know, you can take it to a place that means something. I always caution people that, you know, they should take it to someplace meaningful and make it more about what the image means to them than a display of a certain technique or effect. Because then the image just becomes about technique and effect. All those should be supporting actors within the context of making something that represents your memory of a place or how you feel about a particular subject. We talked about how you can bring in the layer and apply, you know, if you're working with a texture workflow, you can apply the radial lens blur filter into the areas where you want to reduce the effect of some of the harsh characteristics of the layers. So there's, you know, all those kinds of things can be very, very helpful for you in the, you know, the whole process of negotiating, you know, the processing of an image. So you can go from, you know, something that, let me go back into the browse module here. Oh, let's, yeah, that's okay. So, you know, so you can go back, you know, you can look at something that, from just this sort of idea in your head like this into something fun like this, like we just did. Or in the case of this, you know, you can take a scene like this and then turn it into something pretty magical like this. So that's, you know, that's the points that I really wanted to get across were using the Perfect Effects or Perfect Enhance on a layer in the layer stack so that it only affects that layer, and you still preview all the effects of the other layers. Don't be afraid to duplicate the layers and use different blend modes to affect the look of your image. You can save versions quite often, which is a handy thing if you can't quite decide where to go. You can label the layers to remind you of what you've done, or maybe the preset that you used on that particular layer and so forth. And if I'm in Perfect Effects and making some changes to a preset, I'll save it as an additional preset. So you can always save what you've done. We talked about lens blur and so forth. So really, that's in a nutshell, that is the entire, um, I mean, that's really the strength in my mind of this program. On its basic level, it allows you to do a lot of point and click and visually guides you through the creation of your image. But you have a very complex and rich structure underneath where you can go in and do some really critical fine tuning. So, you know, I think is pretty much my presentation for you, and I hope you got something from it. I'm really honored to be here, and I thank On One Software for allowing me to come down and share with you. And because you had the determination and will to sit through this whole presentation, I just wanted to share with you this discount code. If you are watching and you'd like to see some of the presets and textures that are available on photomorphos.com, here's a discount code to reward you for sitting through this diatribe of crazy pixel pushing. So there you have it.